we have looked in what are the different structures found in the cell and what are the functions of each of the cell organelles. Now, in order for the cell to survive, the cell need materials. The cell need oxygen, the cell need glucose, the cell needs proteins, enzymes, and on the other hand, the waste products are also produced in the cell, so the cell needs to get rid of them as well. So there need to be the substances to move in and out of the cell, which happens through the cell membrane, but there are two processes that are involved in movement of substances in and out of the cell. So we categorize these two processes in terms of active transport and the passive transport. Now, in order to understand this active transport and passive transport, let's take an example of a hill. So there's a hill and one boy is standing with the ball at the top of the hill and one boy is standing with the ball down. Now, it is easier for the one at the top of the hill to send the ball down, and it will not take much of the energy to send the ball down. But on the other hand, if you send the ball up, you require more energy because it is going against the gravity. The same thing happens in terms of transport. Whenever the particles move from low to a higher concentration, which means the particle move against the concentration gradient, it requires energy, and this is known as active transport. And when the particles move along the concentration gradient, that is from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration without the use of energy, then that is known as passive transport. Now, since the active transport requires energy, and we know it is the mitochondria that is responsible for making energies for the cell, so the cells which are involved in active transport have loads of mitochondria, and in passive transport, having numerous mitochondria is not a requirement. And the passive transport is of two types, diffusion and osmosis. Now, let us see what is diffusion and what is osmosis. Now, if you see this diagram here, this was an empty container of water and a drop of ink, which was purple in color, was dropped. This ink started to spread out and it spread it out evenly until the particles of the ink are evenly distributed in the water. You can see this with this example. There are more particles onto the left side as compared to the right side. So the particles with time from the left side move towards the right side until the concentration of the particles is equal on both sides. This phenomenon is diffusion. Now, if it comes in the exam, how will you define diffusion? You will say it is the net movement of particles from an area of a higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. It is a passive process, so it does not require energy as the particle moves along the concentration gradient. Now, what are the factors that affects diffusion? Now, the diffusion is dependent on four important factors. One is the surface area. Second is the concentration gradient. Third is the diffusion distance. And fourth is the temperature. Now, greater the surface area, greater is the rate of diffusion of the particle, because if the surface area is more, the particle will get more room for movement. So all the exchange surfaces have a greater surface area, like the root cells has root hairs and intestine has villi. The greater the concentration gradient in the two regions, greater is the rate of diffusion. So all the exchange surfaces, they maintain the steepest concentration gradient. How? The root cells are close to the xylem and villi has rich blood supply that maintains the concentration gradient. Now, diffusion distance has to be smaller for the diffusion to take place because the particles, if they travel lesser distance, they will diffuse quickly. So all the exchange surfaces maintain a smaller diffusion distance by being one cell thick. So if you see any of the exchange surface, it will be one cell thick. And last is the temperature. Greater the temperature, greater is the rate of diffusion as the particle will get more kinetic energy for movement. So to summarize, I can say that rate of diffusion is surface area times the concentration gradient divided by the diffusion distance. And you need to remember that because if any questions on adaptation of diffusion comes in, you need to talk about all these four factors, how that particular surface is maintaining a higher surface area, greater concentration gradient, smaller diffusion distance, and temperature. Now, The diffusion in animals, there are two examples for diffusion in animals. In lungs or the alveoli, there's a diffusion of gases that takes place, and in small intestine, diffusion of digested food takes place. If you see this structure of the alveoli, the lungs have millions of alveoli, which increases the surface area. For the shorter diffusion distance, they are one cell thick, and for maintaining the concentration gradient, they have rich blood supply. On the other hand, the small intestine, the wall is folded to form finger-like projections called the villi. Villi are one cell thick and they have rich blood supply. So if this question comes in the exam, what are the adaptations? You need to talk about all these three factors: how the largest surface area is maintained, how the diffusion distance is maintained, and how the concentration gradient is maintained. Now, another example for diffusion in plants is diffusion of gases through the stomata and diffusions of water and minerals through the stem. So for stomata, it has a greater surface area because it has tiny pores called stomata. For thin diffusion distance, they are one cell thick. And for steep concentration gradient, photosynthetic cells are close to stomata. For the root hair cells, the root cell project to form the root hair cells. Root hair are one cell thick, and to maintain the concentration gradient, xylem is located close to the root hair cells. Okay, so I hope the examples of diffusion in plants and animals, along with the adaptation they have for maximum diffusion, is clear to you. Now let us look at another special case of diffusion called osmosis. Now, why osmosis is a special case? Because there are two special things in osmosis. First, it is the diffusion of only water molecules. Diffusion can be diffusion of any substance, but osmosis is the diffusion of just water molecule. And second, it is a semi-permeable membrane or partially permeable membrane is required. Now, what is a semi-permeable membrane? The membrane that allows only specific molecules to pass through, like water. Now, if you see this diagram here, where there is more water, the water is more in the left because there's no solute. On to the right, there are salt molecules, so it has less water. So water from the dilute solution, dilute means has more water, passes through this concentrated solution through this semi-permeable membrane until the water concentration is equal in both cases, and this is known as osmosis. So osmosis is the net movement of water particles from the region of high concentration of water particles to a region of low concentration of water particle across a semi-permeable membrane. Or you can say it's the movement of water from a dilute solution to a concentrated through a semi-permeable membrane. So I hope this definition of osmosis and this concept that it is the movement just of water molecules to the semi-permeable membrane, and it's the movement of water from a dilute to a concentrated solution is clear to you. Always remember, don't write it as the movement of substance from high concentration to low concentration. That's the wrong definition. It is high concentration of water to a low concentration of water is the correct one. Now, let's see what happens, how osmosis in plants takes place. Now, there are generally three kinds of solution: hypotonic, hypertonic, isotonic. Hyper means more solute. So the hypertonic is that solution which has more solute, so less concentration of water. Hypotonic is the solution that has less solute, so more concentration of water. And isotonic is a solution which has same concentration of water in and out. So if we place a plant cell in a hypertonic solution, what happens? The outer solution has less water, so the water from the cell will move out of the plant cell by osmosis. So the plant cell will shrink and it will recede or move away from the cell wall, and this is known as plasmolysis. So when a cell is placed in a hypertonic solution, it shrinks, and this condition in a plant cell is plasmolysis. On the other hand, when you place it in a hypotonic, that is more concentration of water, the water will move into the plant cell by osmosis. Then the plant cell will increase in size, become swollen. As it becomes swollen, it will give a pressure to the cell wall and the cell membrane. That pressure is known as a turgid pressure or the turgor pressure, and that makes the plant cell in its proper shape. On the other hand, if we place it in an isotonic solution, it will have the same concentration of water outside and inside. So there's no net movement of water. As a result, no pressure will build up and the cell will be soft. So in the plant cell, there are three terms: turgid, plasmolyzed, and flaccid, and you need to remember these terms. Next is in plants, if you place it in an hypotonic solution, that is more concentration of solute, the cell will lose water by osmosis and shrink in size. If you place an isotonic solution, there's no net movement, so the cell remains intact. And in an hypotonic solution, the cell will gain water, so it will swell, and it can eventually burst as well with time. Now, the next transport is the active transport. Active transport, as you remember, we did uphill and downhill. So active transport is uphill. That is movement of substances from low concentration to high concentration. That is against the concentration gradient with the use of energy. It is dependent on respiration as it requires energy. So the cell involved in active transport have lots of mitochondria. In plants, where active transport takes place, it takes place in the roots where water and minerals need to be absorbed against the concentration gradient so that maximum water and minerals can enter the plant root. And in animal, at times the digestive food, even after proper diffusion, need to be absorbed more so that the maximum absorption takes place. So their active transport plays a role. And in some of the marine organisms that has a lot of concentration of salts develop in their body, so they expel that excess salt by the salt glands, which works by active transport. Okay, hope now you are well clear with this topic. Now, what you need to do next is check the specification, make sure the specification is clear to you, and then you need to do the exam question on this topic. If there's still anything that you do not understand, leave a comment below and we'll reply you as soon as possible. Or you can come to our website where we have set up a 24/7 chat support till your exam. You can come anytime, ask any questions, and you can get instant reply. If you like this video, then do subscribe to our channel and do not forget to like, comment, and share this video. If there's any specific topic you want me to make the next video on, then also do leave a comment below and I'll make sure I put that up before your exam. Okay, so I'll see you next in the next video of the next section. Till then, happy revising.